Below that is our core. That's where we start to introduce some pathologies, and then obviously our advanced content, part 1 and part 2. I'm going to go into a basic case here just so we can go through the basic features. As you can see, when I click on basic, we have a few cases here. You can jump around. You can pick and choose which ones you want to scan through. You don't have to complete the first one before moving to the second one. But we'll start with case 1 here. The first thing that's going to pop up is our case history. This is going to give us patient information, chief complaints, vital signs, and then any further scanning instruction. It does disappear pretty quickly, as you can see, it disappears, but we can pull it back up if we want to. So this third button from the left here, this doctor and patient, if I want to click on that, I can bring up my case history. I know this is a basic case, so it's all normal, healthy anatomy. Once I'm ready to scan, I can press OK. So very similar to what I was doing on that white scale box, I'm able to fan, rock, and rotate my sonosim probe. We do have some features to help with image acquisition and image interpretation. The first being our change position tab. So right next to our case history is our change position tab. The virtual patient in front of you will always pop up in this position, which especially for our echo content is not ideal to scan these specific windows. So you can change the position of this patient. So next to our case history, these kind of 3 bodies here, if we click on that, it'll change the position of our virtual patient. We can get a better view of the specific window that we're scanning. Our probe will highlight green when we're in that correct position again. So that's our change position tab. I will say some groups prefer to scan in this position for our cardiac content. So just a personal preference. We are working on getting you this view just from the chest up, so you're not seeing his pelvis either, but just from the chest up. So that's available to you. Next to that is our layers feature. So if I click on that one, it's going to remove that layer of skin. We can see how the lime green ultrasound beam is transecting that underlying anatomy. You're like, well, that's great, but we can't see the heart. If we click it one more time, it removes even more of that anatomy. Now we can really see how that lime green ultrasound beam is transecting the heart, how we're getting these specific images. So I'm going to click back. We get back to our regular position. I'm going to change the position here just to show you the next feature. Let's say I'm fanning, rocking, and rotating. I just cannot get my probe to highlight green. I have no idea where it should be. Next to our layer tab is this probe guide feature. So if I click on that, you can see the long and short axis. If I click on long axis here, you can see right in front of or next to my actual probe is that shadow or silhouette of a probe. The goal here is to just line up my probe. You'll hear that chime. Your probe will highlight green. You know it's in the correct position. Same thing with the short axis here. If I wanted to, I could just line it up. I know my probe is in the correct position then. Once it's highlighted green and it's lined up, I would just recommend clicking out of it, or else every little move that you make, you will hear that chime when you get back into that correct position. So that's our probe guide feature. As we get into some of our advanced content, which I'll briefly show you at the end, there are different probe guides, which I'll show you, like I said. Next to our probe guide is our lock probe feature. So if I click lock probe, that's going to lock my probe in place on my virtual patient. I'm still seeing a very clear dynamic image over here on my ultrasound window. So if I want to take a closer look at that, if I need to be hands-free for whatever reason, I can do so just by locking my probe in place. And it will just stay on the same place on my virtual patient. Now I know my probe is in the correct position. I know we're in the parasternal window, but maybe I'm not entirely sure what I'm looking at. This is a basic case, so it's all normal, healthy anatomy. But if I want to see if there's something abnormal, any pathology, just take a closer look at this ultrasound window. Obviously, we're scanning in a virtual environment, so there are a few limitations, like we lack some translation. We lose a few degrees of movement, but these are all real patients, real images, real scans that we've collected. There's no CGI, no animation. So next to our lock probe feature, we have this head with a light bulb in. These are our findings videos. The findings videos are actually going to be the master scan of this actual patient. So our in-house sonographer will walk you through that master scan. They'll discuss the type of probe being used. They'll point out the anatomy, physiology. As we get more advanced, they'll point out anything abnormal, pathologies. In this, they'll discuss the different parts of the heart, what exactly we're seeing in this scan, both in the long and short axis of the parasternal window. So just so you can see what that looks like.
a transducer to scan the heart of this healthy 38-year-old male model. We're in a parasternal view, and this is a parasternal long axis view. We have the right ventricle at the top of the screen, left ventricle, you can see the posterior wall. This is the mitral valve, the anterior leaflet opening up. The aortic valve is closed, you can see the leaflets coming together. This is the aortic outflow tract, the descending aortic here, and this is the left ventricle. Now as the video starts moving.
So as you can see, a real ultrasound, this is taken in a clinical setting with a real ultrasound machine. They'll walk you through everything. Like I said, there's a few more degrees of movement. They're able to scan around that anatomy a little bit more, but it is the same images that you're seeing up here. They will walk you through the long and short axis views as well. There is a different findings video for each scanning window. So we've been in the parasternal window this whole time, long and short axis. Maybe you're wondering how we get to a different scanning window since we're unable to translate. Above our kind of main menu bar right here, we have this navigation bar. So we have the parasternal, apical, and subcostal. Two different ways that we can move to these different points. The first is just by clicking right here on our apical window. Our probe would move over to our apical window. Or we can click directly here on the circle on our virtual patient and move to the subcostal. We can change the position of our virtual patient. I'll go into the apical. We may need to change the position of our virtual patient. All of our features will work the same though. We have our probe guide available. We can line it up. Our findings video will be different. They'll walk us through exactly what we're seeing in this specific window. But that's how we translate or move to these different scanning points. And like I said, different findings video for each of those. Next to that is our test mode. This is really just a way to test yourself. Some instructors may do like proctored exams or screen shares where they will ask you to be in test mode. But if I click on test mode, it's really going to lock out some of our helpful features. So when I click on that, first our co-registered image disappears, which I'm going to cover next. Secondly, our probe will no longer highlight green. So even if your probe is in the correct position, it will not highlight green when you're in test mode, just like you're scanning in more of a realistic setting. Lastly, it will lock out our findings video, our probe guide, and our layers features. So that's how the test mode is. You can simply click right out of it, though, when you're on your own. So like I said, there's no way to know if you're in test mode unless you were doing like a proctored exam or doing a screen share or something like that. So that's our test mode. Next to that, this is our compression and our needle tab, mostly for our vascular and our procedure content. Anything that's kind of grayed out or dark, you're unable to click on it. Just means it's not available for this specific case. It doesn't mean you don't have access to it at all. Any questions on the features that we've covered so far? I know it's a lot of information. A lot of times it's helpful to definitely just start scanning and then, answer any questions you have. But anything on these features I've covered that you'd like me to go over that doesn't make sense,